This is a production of WGBH2 Boston. News with local depth and local perspective. A military victory or dangerous precedent. An expert weighs in on Bowe Bergdahl's release. Plus the local impact of the president's plan to cut greenhouse gases. And why diagnosing grief as a disorder has divided the psychiatric profession. From the WGBH News studios, this is Greater Boston.
Hello, welcome to Greater Boston on TV and streaming online and on mobile. I'm Emily Rooney. Just days after President Obama outlined plans for winding down the war in Afghanistan, the only American prisoner of war from that conflict was freed by the Taliban. And while some see Army Sergeant Bowe Bergdahl's release as a victory, others say it came at too high a price. The Obama administration says a proof-of-life video like this one raised serious concern about the health of American prisoner of war, Bowe Bergdahl.
Let me go. Get me to go. Just release. Get me to be released.
Bergdahl is now being treated at an American hospital in Germany, and how he got there is the subject of a contentious debate.
Problem is, if you swap or pay to get your hostages back, you incentivize hostage taking.
U.S. officials struck a deal with the Taliban, agreeing to release 5 senior Taliban combatants from Guantanamo Bay in exchange for the 28-year-old soldier.
What we did was ensure that, as always, the United States doesn't leave a man or a woman on the battlefield.
Critics say the administration broke the law by failing to notify Congress 30 days before the detainees were released from Guantanamo Bay. But National Security Advisor to the President, Susan Rice, says the move was justified.
It was determined that it was necessary and appropriate not to adhere to the 30-day notification requirement, because it would have potentially meant that the opportunity to get Sergeant Bergdahl would have been lost.
It's unclear when Bergdahl will return to the United States, but the debate over the circumstances of his release is likely to continue for a long time to come. My next guest is an international security expert. Jim Walsh teaches at MIT and has written extensively about terrorism. Welcome back to Greater Boston.
Good to see you, Emily.
So I'm curious just about the terminology off the bat. Prisoner of war versus hostage. I mean, what government was he a prisoner of? He was being held by a certain sect.
Yes, and I think all these terms are a little murky in a post 9/11 environment. Is a terrorist a combatant, or is it a terrorist? Obviously, the Taliban, it's not a government, right? But it once held power. It once was a government. It's not quite a non-state actor like Al-Qaeda, but it is extremist. So unfortunately, the terms don't hold up very well in the new security reality we have to deal with.
Does it matter in terms of what the president did, whether it was a prisoner of war or a hostage?
I think it might matter legally, but it doesn't matter in the larger substantive and political sense. I mean, the fact is we're fighting the Taliban, they're fighting us, and there's a long history, from trading prisoners with the Nazis all the way through Reagan, Bush, and others of negotiating with an adversary in order to try to get people back.
I mean, the president was saying there were exigent circumstances. We don't really know what the total deal is with Bowe Bergdahl. I mean, you could even see in the video he's having a hard time speaking. They said he was having a hard time speaking English when he got to Germany. But, I mean, the bigger issue is whether this was legal. Some members of Congress are saying it wasn't.
Yeah, I hear you on that, and I think it probably, they didn't notify him, so it is probably illegal. But when that law was passed, did Congress really have in mind we have an opportunity to get a soldier back? That's probably not, from a foreign country, that was probably not, the focus was probably on Gitmo and Guantanamo and wanting to know when people were going to be transferred, less a situation in which there's a swap of people. They had been trying to do this for a while, and it had broken down several times in negotiations with the Taliban. And so they saw this opportunity, and they took it. And frankly, there may be some legal niceties involved, but I think the outcome speaks for itself.
Do you think the American people know exactly what the deal was? Do you think that there was money exchanged as well? They're saying it was a swap, Bowe Bergdahl for five. I mean, is that...
I have no idea what the deal is. I don't think we won't know until those documents are declassified 30 years from now, or someone writes a book and leaks it out. Typically when there are deals like this, there's what's announced publicly, and then there's what's agreed to on the side. And that stuff is kept secret sometimes because it has to be kept secret in order to execute the deal. But what that is, we won't know till later on, when we're talking about legacy issues.
Presidents over time have said we do not negotiate with terrorists, starting with Gerald Ford, I think, with that, the hijackers of the airplanes. Does this set a dangerous precedent?
No, it doesn't. We always negotiate with terrorists. It's probably a good thing that we do. I mean, what was Ronald Reagan known for? At least one of the scandals was arms for hostages, right? He was doing it. President Bush, and in each case I supported these, or at least in terms of President Bush. What did they do during the Iraq War? They negotiated with the Sunni Arab extremists who were killing Americans in Iraq and flipped them into the sons of Iraq, who then worked for us in trying to defeat the Taliban. And every country does this. I mean, Israel will return hundreds of prisoners in exchange for a single Israeli officer. So I think this is standard practice. We've done it. Other countries have done it. And in the main, it's a good thing. Listen, this is 5 Taliban members, 1 American. 5 people is not going to tip the balance and determine Afghanistan's future.
But you look at those guys, and they look like they can't wait to, figure out how the next extremist move. I mean, they are being told they have to stay in Qatar for the first year. I don't know who's going to enforce that.
Right.
But.
I think that's probably window dressing. And I understand there's a legitimate concern here. Do I think some of them are going to end back up in the Taliban? Yes, I do. But also, it's worth keeping in mind, they've been there 12 years, right? Some of them their capabilities may be compromised, just like, that's seriously right. Some of them may have been tortured, or, there are all sorts of things that could have happened. Do they have the same mental and physical capability? The Taliban, life has gone on without them. So imagine if you showed up at work 12 years later, right? So it's not clear what's going to happen there. I assume some of them will join the bad guys and they will do bad things, but that's sort of the price of doing business in the real world. And as I say, I think it's highly unlikely this is going to tip the balance or determine the future in Afghanistan.
We'll probably go in and get them with drones in a year anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So, mark your words. That could very well be what happens.
All right, Jim Walsh, pleasure to have you.
Thank you.